Well, this is Durga Fuller, and this is another talk in their series on sovereign self. And this is the day before winter solstice. I'm recording this, um, and I realize that if you're listening to the recording, you may not be near winter solstice. Um, but I think that these elements live in us and can always be useful to bring into our contemplation. Um, and as always, I want to honor my teachers, um, both seen and unseen. I haven't come to these places in my psyche on my own. Nothing happens alone. And so the topic that I had chosen, I think, really was spurred on by the time of the year. I generally feel these few weeks before solstice pretty acutely. They are often accompanied by, if I'm not conscious, they're accompanied by some distress in my system. But once I remember what the time of year is, some ease comes in. And I think that's part of what I'm wanting to point to here today as I coalesce these thoughts around grief. And grief has certainly been written a lot about. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a lot of writing about, a lot of research about grief, and she came up with, I'm sure everyone hearing this has heard of the 5 stages of grief or the 7 stages of grief. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's important, although it's not really the core of what I want to communicate here. But it's something that happens, these, when you want to call them stages of grief or expressions of grief, experiences of grief, they do happen. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was apparently known to say later in her life that she actually regretted having put out these 5 stages as this sort of empirical thing that happens. For one thing, she had meant it to be referring specifically to people who had a terminal diagnosis of some sort, of the process of coming to terms with the understanding that their death was imminent. And so part of what she reported regretting is that it got applied to people who were grieving someone who had died in their life, and she felt like it was inappropriate. So I just want to acknowledge that, and what I want to name her, these experiences that she named, the shock and denial that comes when, and again, I do think that this comes in any situation where we hear something that we really don't want to happen, whether that's our own diagnosis or somebody else's diagnosis or someone we love who's died, or knowing we're going to have a divorce, or any of those things that happen in our lives that are out of our control. I think this is a process of being faced with the reality that we don't control a lot in our lives. And that's hard. I think that part of our human nature and of these cognitive brains that we have, the cognitive parts of our brains, is really oriented around control. And coming to terms with not being able to control maybe anything. We don't even control our own minds. It's an important piece of work that we do. So, coming to terms with knowing that something is completely out of our control. There's shock and denial. There's anger. There's bargaining, often with God. There's depression, which I also want to call numbness. And then acceptance. So those are experiences that I think we have when coming to terms with something that is out of our control. And then coming back to this time of year, this is also out of our control. I know that how I experience this time of year, it's fairly consistent, feeling a lot of sense of contraction and slowness and tiredness and we call it in my family slogging towards solstice. It's like, oh, that's right, we're slogging towards solstice. So once I remember that, then it gives permission for it to just be. And I can drop some of the resistance that I might feel towards not feeling up. As though there's this, we give this value to feeling up. And if we feel down, then we've lost value somehow, or something's wrong, or something is out of our control. So there can be a great healing in just saying, oh, this is out of my control. I can't do anything about this. I can't do anything about the fact that it's cold and maybe it's raining or it's snowing and it's not maybe as pleasant to go out of the house or even to just get out of bed. And it's okay to feel that even while I get out of bed and I get dressed and I go out and get wet and have to do all of the things. I can feel that resistance and know that the resistance is just part of the contraction of this time of year. Sometimes the trick is to not resist the resistance. So what does that have to do with grief? When I use the word grief, I'm not usually referring to that whole 5-step Elizabeth Kubler-Ross definition around it. To me, grief, and maybe if I were to really kind of hone in on some part of that, the grief to me is the acceptance part, or it's tied up in the acceptance. And I guess the way I think of it is, okay, there's a process of grief, which is what Kubler-Ross wrote about, and then there's an experience of grief. And the experience of grief is more like an emotion. All of those things that are this process of grief are emotions in one way or another that seems sort of distinct. Um, but this feeling of grief to me is this sense of just dropping into what's true. Usually something that's true that's not very pleasant, right? So to me, it's a process of coming into relationship with what is true, something that's out of my control that I might wish were in my control. So this resistance that comes in is really natural. It's organismic. it's it's just a part of the flow of our lives that there's expansion and contraction. We see it in the earth with the seasons. We see it in our bodies with our breathing. We see it in the day as we wake up, we're active, and then we go to bed. It's expansion and contraction. And there's a relationship to that expansion and contraction. And I just think it's very natural often for there to be resistance to contraction. I mean, you could even say that it's, all right, this may be a leap, but I'll make the leap. That we we don't want to die. There's a physical experience that is it's physiological that the organism doesn't want to die. We don't want to let go. If something blocks our air passage and we can't breathe, we're going to fight to breathe, right? There is a process that is so natural to want to live. We want to survive, the survival instinct. And then as humans, and maybe there are other animals that have enough brain capacity to have something else that comes online around it, we can come to terms and go, oh, there's death. And the body may still fight to live. So that's kind of the contraction I think I'm pointing to, this like panic of like, no, I want it to feel good all the time. And it's totally natural to wish it felt better, to wish it was easier. And we have a capacity to come into relationship with the fact that it's not easy. The fact that that good state I had all summer is dying. It's these little deaths that we come into relationship with, and part of that is a sadness. It's like, oh, this is happening. And maybe some tears form because we didn't want it to happen. So I really want to offer this idea that grief can be embraced, that grief, the kind of grief that I'm talking about, this coming into relationship with something that we can't control, that the sadness that comes with that is there's a sweetness there, that we can settle into it and just say, oh, this is hard. Part of me doesn't like it. And there's something sweet in it too. There's something sweet in just knowing that. it's a kind of coming home. And that bring it into this discussion of sovereignty. Is that I think that when we can connect with this, oh, this is true, then we come back to ourselves. That the resistance maybe can be described as a way of sort of leaking our energy, as I've talked about in other talks, this kind of leaving ourselves, wishing things were different. And the sadness that comes with the acceptance is actually a landing and a coming home. And we get to feel our core again in that. So, just with those concepts and thoughts circling around, let's land. Just land right here in this moment with whatever's true. Just finding the sensations in your body. Whatever they are right now. You may be noticing sounds of my voice, other sounds in the room or outside of the room. If your eyes are still open, there's light and color and shape and texture. If your eyes are closed, even then there's something that happens in the seeing. There's maybe some color on the back sides of your eyelids, even shapes that might move. There may be thinking or feeling that comes in about this experience, whatever these experiences are that are being noticed. And just allowing the attention to rest in your core. To rest all through the trunk of your body. There may be sensations of breathing there. There may be other sensations. Whatever they are, this is your truth. The truth of this moment. And if you notice thinking coming in, know that it's utterly normal and it can be in the background. Just give it a little friendly nod and then coming back into the belly, into the chest, into this whole core area. And as you rest in this area of your trunk, be aware of gravity. Gravity mm, is settling you. There's this dependable sturdiness of the earth claiming you. There's a truth in this. We belong to the earth. And there's a rightness to that. And there's not a lot that you control about that. You may have some choice in how you relate to it, but you don't have any choice about the fact of it. And what is true is that things change. And everything we have right now, someday we will not have. It will be gone. things we love, people we love, this body. Will not last forever. And there's a rightness to that. And there's also a complete, understandable resistance to that. Maybe not in this moment, but in general, our minds resist that truth. And that is completely normal. It's letting your attention rest in both your belly and in your heart area. See if you can hold both of those areas in awareness. And so the belly can be this stable connection with the earth, with the truth of this belonging to a deeper process. And this heart open to whatever extent we can open, can be our connection with other people, connection with the suffering and resistance that is completely natural. Whether that's our own suffering or other people's suffering, there's really no difference. And this is what it means to be human. You have the capacity to hold both of these things, this deep connection with truth and a tender holding of suffering. And this sadness that we might call grief, this relationship with things ending, is actually a really important part of your birthright. And so allowing this to stay with you to whatever extent it can as you come back into the room. When you're ready, opening your eyes gently, just letting a little light in. Let this transition be gentle. And may any benefit experienced through this process be dedicated to all beings in all the realms and all the times. We always know that we practice not only for ourselves, but for all. May all be happy. May all be peaceful. May all experience ease.